Man killed by state trooper after fatally stabbing a woman and a dog in road rage incident near DC. Before we dive in, this one is not easy to hear. If you believe in justice, accountability, and uncovering the truth behind violent crimes that shake entire communities, make sure you subscribe, like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because what happened on that quiet stretch of road near Washington, D.C. started as an ordinary evening commute and ended in blood, flashing lights, and a fatal confrontation that no one saw coming. The roadside that turned into a crime scene. The first 911 call came in at 6:42 p.m. The dispatcher could barely understand the woman on the other end. She was screaming. Not words, just panic. There's a man, he's got a knife, oh my God, he's stabbing her. In the background, car horns blared. Engines idled. Someone shouted for help. Then the line went dead. Rush hour traffic near the outskirts of Washington, D.C. had slowed to a crawl along a divided highway not far from the Maryland border. The sun was sinking low, casting long orange shadows over brake lights and windshields. Drivers were impatient, boxed in by construction barriers and narrowing lanes. It was the kind of congestion locals complained about every day. But on this evening, frustration turned fatal. When the first patrol unit arrived, officers didn't see a typical traffic dispute. They saw chaos. A silver SUV sat crooked across two lanes, its driver's side door hanging open. 20 feet ahead of it, near the concrete median, a woman lay motionless on the asphalt. Her small white dog was beside her. And standing just a few yards away, shirt streaked, chest heaving, was a man gripping a knife. Witnesses later told investigators that it started with honking. The woman, identified as 34-year-old Lauren Mitchell, a healthcare administrator from Northern Virginia, had been driving home after picking up her dog from a grooming appointment. Friends described her as warm, patient, someone who volunteered at local shelters on weekends. She had no criminal history, no known enemies. The man behind her in traffic, 42-year-old Derek Caldwell, had been weaving aggressively through lanes for several miles, according to multiple drivers. He drove a dark pickup truck with out-of-state plates. Witnesses said he appeared enraged long before the vehicles ever stopped. One driver recalled seeing Caldwell slam his hands against the steering wheel, shouting inside his truck. Traffic slowed suddenly near a merge point. Lauren tapped her brakes. Caldwell leaned on his horn. Several witnesses said Lauren briefly raised her hand out of her window, not flipping him off, not yelling, just a gesture that seemed to say, "There's nowhere to go." That was enough. Caldwell threw his truck into park. He stepped out. And within seconds, the entire highway shifted from annoyance to horror. Dashcam footage later recovered from a nearby vehicle showed Caldwell storming toward Lauren's SUV. The video had no audio, but the body language was unmistakable, aggressive, confrontational. Lauren cracked her window at first, perhaps thinking it was just another shouting match. But Caldwell yanked the door open. A struggle followed. Drivers began recording on their phones. One witness, a rideshare driver named Malik Thompson, later told detectives, "It didn't look real. It looked like something from a movie. He just snapped." Investigators believe the knife had been inside Caldwell's truck. Within seconds of the confrontation escalating, he pulled it. Lauren tried to retreat toward the median barrier. Her dog, panicked, barked and lunged. The attack was swift, brutal, public. Screams echoed across the highway as drivers scrambled to get out of their vehicles or reverse away from the scene. Some froze. Others called 911. One bystander attempted to intervene but backed away when Caldwell turned toward him, blade raised. By the time the first Maryland state trooper pulled onto the shoulder, Lauren was unresponsive. The trooper exited his cruiser with his weapon drawn, shouting commands. "Drop the knife. Drop it now." Multiple witnesses confirmed that Caldwell did not comply. Instead, he paced erratically, breathing heavily, eyes darting from the fallen woman to the approaching officer. The dog lay still beside her. The trooper repeated his commands. "Drop the weapon." Traffic cameras captured what happened next in grainy, distant footage later released during the investigation. Caldwell moved toward the officer. It wasn't a sprint. It wasn't a full charge. But it was forward movement, with a knife in his hand. 2 shots rang out. Caldwell collapsed onto the pavement just feet from the median wall. The entire incident, from the first honk to the final gunshot, lasted less than 4 minutes. 4 minutes that would ripple through 2 states, ignite debates over road rage and mental instability, and leave families shattered. Emergency responders flooded the scene. Paramedics worked on Lauren, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. Her dog did not survive. Caldwell was transported to a nearby hospital under police escort. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Within hours, news alerts began lighting up phones across the region. Man shot by state trooper after fatal road rage stabbing near D.C. Social media exploded with cell phone footage. Some clips showed the immediate aftermath, Lauren lying on the pavement, drivers crying in the background. Others captured the moment troopers secured the scene. Speculation spread faster than confirmed facts. Who was Caldwell? Why did he react so violently over traffic? Was he under the influence? Was this a random explosion, or something building beneath the surface for years? As investigators combed through Caldwell's vehicle, they made a discovery that shifted the narrative from spontaneous rage to something potentially darker. Inside his truck, on the passenger seat, was a handwritten notebook. On the first page were 3 words, written in block letters. "They all deserve it." Detectives exchanged glances. Was this truly a sudden act of road rage? Or had something been simmering inside Caldwell long before that highway confrontation? And as they turned the pages of that notebook, they realized this case was about to become far more complicated than anyone initially believed. Because what they found next suggested Lauren may not have been the first person Caldwell had targeted. And that revelation would change everything. The notebook and the pattern no one wanted to see. The first thing detectives noticed about the notebook wasn't the handwriting. It was the dates. Each page was marked carefully in the top corner. Month, day, time. Not every day. Not even every week. But scattered entries stretching back nearly 8 months. And the tone wasn't random. It was organized. As crime scene technicians processed Caldwell's truck under bright floodlights, investigators stood just feet away from the blood-stained highway, flipping through pages that read more like grievances than diary entries. People think they can disrespect you and drive away. They block you on purpose. They smirk. They test you. The entries describe traffic encounters, minor inconveniences that most drivers forget within minutes. Someone cutting him off. A car braking too quickly. A pedestrian taking too long to cross. But to Caldwell, these weren't small irritations. They were provocations. And as detectives read deeper, a chilling pattern began to form. He wasn't just angry. He felt hunted. In one entry dated 3 weeks before the stabbing, Caldwell wrote, "They push and push until you're forced to respond. Then they act shocked." Respond. That word would stick with investigators. Because what happened on that highway wasn't a defensive reaction. It was an escalation. Meanwhile, back at Lauren Mitchell's home in Northern Virginia, friends and family gathered in disbelief. The house still smelled faintly of lavender candles. Her car keys were still missing from the hook by the door. Her dog's empty leash hung near the entryway. Her sister, Emily, told reporters through tears, "She texted me at 6:15. She said traffic was awful but she'd be home soon." Home soon. 27 minutes later, she was gone. The brutality of the attack stunned even seasoned law enforcement officers. Public violence. In broad daylight. Surrounded by witnesses. But what disturbed them more was what they uncovered about Caldwell's recent behavior. According to co-workers at a small logistics company where he'd been employed until recently, Caldwell had grown increasingly volatile in the months leading up to the incident. He'd complained obsessively about disrespect from strangers. He believed drivers intentionally boxed him in. One coworker told investigators he'd come in talking about traffic like it was warfare. Warfare. Phone records revealed that earlier on the day of the attack, Caldwell had searched online for news stories involving road rage fatalities. He had also searched for local traffic congestion reports. Was he planning something? Or was he feeding an obsession that finally boiled over? Autopsy results confirmed Lauren had no defensive weapon, no aggressive behavior noted by witnesses. Every account aligned, she had attempted to disengage. Which raises a question I want you to think about carefully. How many times have we brushed off extreme anger as just a bad temper? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because what we ignore in daily life can sometimes grow into something far more dangerous. As investigators expanded their review of Caldwell's background, they discovered 2 prior police reports involving aggressive driving complaints. No arrests, no charges, just warnings. In one case, a driver claimed Caldwell followed her for several miles, screaming at her through his window. No physical violence that time, just intimidation. But that detail made detectives wonder, had he been testing boundaries? Pushing limits to see how far he could go? The Maryland State Police also conducted a full review of the trooper's body camera footage. The video showed the officer arriving to immediate chaos, civilians yelling, Lauren on the ground, Caldwell pacing with a visible knife. Commands were clear. Repeated. The officer backed away while issuing orders. When Caldwell advanced, the shots were fired. The review board later ruled the trooper's actions justified under department policy. An armed suspect moving toward an officer after committing a violent felony leaves little room for hesitation. Still, the community felt shaken. Because this wasn't a late-night alley confrontation. This was rush hour. Families in minivans. College students. Commuters heading home. Anyone could have been in that lane. And that's the part that makes this case different. If you've ever experienced road rage, whether from someone else or within yourself, pause for a second. Ask yourself, what separates a moment of frustration from a moment of irreversible violence? If stories like this matter to you, real cases, real consequences, make sure you hit subscribe right now. Because we don't just tell crime stories here, we examine the warning signs before they explode. Back at the evidence lab, analysts found something else inside Caldwell's truck. A printed map. Not random. Highlighted sections of highway near DC marked in yellow. Investigators initially assumed it related to his job. But when they overlaid the highlighted routes with his phone's GPS history, they found repeated loops, late-night drives along congested corridors. Sometimes for hours. No clear destination. Just movement. And on the final page of the notebook, written the night before the attack, were 8 words. Tomorrow I won't be ignored again. Ignored. The word echoed the same grievance threaded throughout the pages. This wasn't about traffic. It was about perceived humiliation. Detectives began consulting forensic psychologists to understand the mindset. Was this intermittent explosive disorder? Narcissistic injury? Deep-seated paranoia? Or something more deliberate? Here's where it gets unsettling. Caldwell legally purchased the knife just 4 days before the incident. Security footage from the store showed him calm. Methodical. No signs of distress. Which suggests preparation. And preparation changes everything. Because spontaneous rage doesn't usually involve written documentation and timed purchases. It involves impulse. This felt rehearsed. And if that's true, then Lauren wasn't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was chosen by circumstance. By a man looking for a trigger. As investigators prepared a formal timeline for public release, one final discovery raised a chilling possibility. In Caldwell's deleted phone drafts folder, analysts recovered a message never sent. They'll finally understand. Understand what? That question still lingers. Because sometimes the most dangerous individuals aren't the loudest. They're the ones building a narrative inside their own minds. And if you're still watching right now, I want you to do something. Tell me below, do you believe this was pure road rage, or a calculated act waiting for the right moment? Your perspective matters here. Because we're going to break down the final hours leading up to that highway confrontation, and reveal the one detail that investigators almost missed. Something that could redefine how this entire tragedy is remembered. And trust me, once you hear it, you'll never look at a simple traffic argument the same way again. The final hours and the detail that changed everything. At 4:11 p.m. on the day of the attack, Derek Caldwell's phone connected to a cell tower less than 2 miles from his apartment. At 4:32 p.m., he made a short call to an unknown number. At 4:47 p.m., he searched one phrase. Rush hour near DC, worst traffic times. That search would later become a crucial piece of the timeline, because it suggested something investigators had been hesitant to say out loud. He wasn't just caught in traffic. He went looking for it. In the final hours before the highway confrontation, Caldwell drove in circles through some of the most congested corridors in the region. GPS data showed him exiting and re-entering highways repeatedly, as if testing volume, waiting for density to build. Traffic wasn't the problem. Traffic was the opportunity. Meanwhile, Lauren Mitchell's day had been ordinary. Security cameras showed her laughing with a receptionist at the dog grooming salon. She tipped generously. She checked her phone. She left at 6:05 p.m. No urgency. No fear. Two completely different emotional worlds moving toward the same stretch of asphalt. And here's the detail investigators almost overlooked. When forensic analysts examined Caldwell's truck more thoroughly, they discovered a small dashboard camera mounted near the rearview mirror. It wasn't obvious at first glance. It was tucked high, angled slightly downward. The memory card inside was damaged from the chaos that followed the shooting, but technicians managed to recover partial footage. The video did not show the stabbing itself, but it showed something else. For nearly 9 minutes before the confrontation, Caldwell was narrating to himself. Not yelling, not screaming, talking, calmly. They think they can block me. They always do this. Today's different. His voice wasn't frenzied. It wasn't incoherent. It was focused. And that changed the tone of the entire case. Because rage is explosive. This sounded deliberate. The footage captured him tapping the steering wheel while traffic slowed. When Lauren's SUV merged ahead of him, he zoomed in with the camera function on his phone. He said, almost under his breath, "There you are." There you are. Investigators replayed that line dozens of times. Was he identifying her specifically? Or was he identifying a symbol, another offender, in his internal narrative? We may never know. But what became clear is that this wasn't a random emotional snap in a single second. It was an emotional buildup searching for a release. And that release came in the worst possible way. The Maryland State Police finalized their report weeks later. The troopers' response was ruled legally justified. The timeline was reconstructed minute by minute. The public was informed. But closure is not the same as understanding. Lauren's family held a candlelight vigil near the site of the attack. Traffic continued to rush by as friends placed flowers along the guardrail. Drivers slowed, some unaware of the story, others deeply familiar. Emily Mitchell stood before reporters again, her voice steadier this time. She wasn't part of a battle. She was just driving home. Just driving home. If that line hits you the way it should, take a second and hit the like button. Not for the algorithm, for awareness. Because stories like this need to be seen, shared, and understood before they repeat. As forensic psychologists reviewed Caldwell's writings and recordings, they concluded he exhibited escalating grievance fixation, an unhealthy pattern of interpreting everyday interactions as personal attacks. But here's the haunting truth. There were warning signs. Co-workers noticed it. Drivers experienced it. Police documented it. Yet nothing legally actionable stopped it. And that forces a difficult conversation. How do we intervene before anger becomes violence? I want you to comment below. Should aggressive driving complaints be taken more seriously? Or would that risk over-policing everyday conflict? Let's talk about it. Because if we avoid the conversation, we ignore the pattern. And patterns are what investigators rely on. In the final reconstruction of events, analysts determined that from the moment Caldwell exited his truck to the moment shots were fired, only 73 seconds passed. 73 seconds. That's all it took to destroy multiple families, spark regional headlines, and leave a permanent scar on a stretch of highway commuters we'll never see the same way again. But here's the twist that continues to unsettle investigators. In Caldwell's apartment, discovered during a lawful search after his death, was another notebook. Completely blank. Except for the inside cover. Written in the same block letters as the truck notebook were 4 words. Control is taken, not given. Control. That was the thread connecting everything. Not traffic. Not disrespect. Control. And when someone builds their identity around reclaiming control at any cost, the cost is often paid by innocent people. If you've watched this far, you're not here for sensationalism. You're here to understand the psychology, the warning signs, the layers beneath the headlines. So make sure you subscribe right now, because the next case we cover will challenge everything you think you know about ordinary situations turning deadly. Lauren Mitchell's story is not just about a road rage incident near Washington, D.C. It's about how quickly everyday spaces can become crime scenes. It's about how grievances, left unchecked, can grow teeth. And it's about the thin line between frustration and fatal consequence. The highway reopened later that night. By morning, commuters were honking again. Engines idled. Lanes merged. Life moved forward. But for those who witnessed what happened, and for a family that will forever measure time as before and after 6:42 p.m., that stretch of road will never just be traffic again. And the next time someone leans on their horn in frustration, the question lingers in the silence that follows. Who's sitting in the car behind you? If this story stayed with you, share it, talk about it, and stay with this channel, because sometimes the most dangerous stories begin in the most ordinary places.